Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the No Bullcrap Podcast.
Hello.
Today we have a special episode. I am joined by...
It's actually a special
That's right.
episode. I am joined today by the three other men of the Green family. And I was about to say boys, but we don't call them boys anymore.
No boys
We don't
left.
call ourselves boys anymore.
The better looking version of the green fellas.
Which is us?
Me?
No, it's us three. It's excluded.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. You mean we're improving on his show?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
We're making it. Yeah.
No, but hey, if you're listening to this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcast, I want to encourage you, go watch it on YouTube or my Instagram, because if you leave comments on the YouTube, then I will read them in the next episode. And that gives you guys a way of engaging with me and being able to ask questions, and then I'll be able to answer on the podcast. So today, we're doing a new thing. I am, like I said, joined by the rest of the guys in my family, and we're going to be talking a little bit of philosophy. We're going to be talking about the proper role of government. And we've been having, and just let me set this up for you real quick. First of all, just know that none of us are really experts. I would say my dad is probably the only expert in the family. He's the only one that's been an elected official and works in this arena. And has the credentials for the things that we're going to be talking about. But
I don't know. To be honest, Trey could probably go head to head with Socrates, something like that. He could probably hold his own.
And we can even get into Trey's knowledge base in a little bit. But
that would be fun, wouldn't it? Go ahead
it would be very
Socrates,
fun.
Dude, that'd be crazy.
Come on.
So just so you guys
imagine
know,
a Joe Rogan podcast with Socrates. Come on, that'd be hilarious. I'm sorry, I keep it.
No, you're
Awesome.
good.
His
You're good.
speeches are as long as a Rogan podcast.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
It fits.
So our family, probably the thing we enjoy doing the most together, aside from our work, because we know how important it is, we love just sitting around the fire and having philosophical conversations. Eating. Yeah. Wait, did you say eating?
Eating.
Okay, I just want to make sure I heard that right.
Yeah.
So sitting around the fire, smoking a good cigar, talking philosophy, it doesn't get much better than that for us Green Boys, because when you're talking about philosophy, theology, the higher levels of wisdom and doctrine and how life works, and we're going to get into the proper role of government, the proper role of a functioning society. You need to know these things, because if you don't talk about them, if you don't become well-versed on these kind of topics, you're going to be a sheep. You're going to be used by people that do and have bad intentions. And so you need to, I forget what the saying is, but basically, if you're not a knowledgeable person, people who are knowledgeable are going to take advantage of you. Knowledge is power. And so we take very seriously talking these topics through together, and coming together collectively to try to seek out truth and sharpen each other. Iron sharpens iron, as the good book says. And so we're going to open this. This is also just a completely off-the-cuff conversation. I have a couple of topics here that I'm going to try to use to guide us, but this is not scripted or anything. This is just us, just off the top of our head having a conversation, which is what we do.
This is what we do.
This is what we do. We want to invite you guys into what us as the Green Boys and our dad do on the daily basis. So we're going to start this conversation off talking about the proper role of
Is it too soon
government.
for me to make a correction?
Go ahead.
Okay, so all I'm going to say is you said knowledge is power, and I would argue that the use of knowledge is power. So a lot of really well-educated idiots.
This is true.
With more, college degrees than a thermometer. I mean, they have tons of head knowledge, but they don't have much wisdom, and they don't use that knowledge to actually affect.
What was the use
change.
of power, or
The use of knowledge.
So okay, what if it's the wisely using of knowledge?
Even better, because there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom too.
Yeah.
But let's not go. I'm sorry. I just wanted to point out.
I was just doing what
It's
you
not
did
enough to
him,
sit around
Mr.
and talk
Messer.
about it. We have to do something with
Yeah.
it. So
Agreed.
This is where we try to sharpen each other, like you're saying, to make sure that we're getting to wisdom with that knowledge and then act on it. Right?
Yeah. Again, I forget who says this, so I'm not off to a great start remembering my quotes and stuff, but somebody said that wisdom is just knowledge applied. It's taking the knowledge that you have and putting it to good use. And
I wouldn't agree with
and
that.
I would argue, and I would even tweak that a little bit, because wisdom, I would say, is applying God knowledge. It's applying good knowledge that comes from God. Because if you're applying, wicked knowledge, it's not being wise. The Bible describes wisdom in a different manner.
Yeah, wisdom would be the proper use of that knowledge.
Yes, agreed.
Well, and that's the big inherent flaw with the people that you're referring to in terms of the intelligentsia, right? As Thomas Sowell would call the self-anointed people that believe that they're responsible for making all these decisions for us because they're all knowing. They don't have that wisdom because they don't get pushed, right? They're in these echo chambers to where they're all just building on each other's ideas and saying, look how smart you are and look how smart you are. And they're not in the real world where their ideas are getting challenged, kind of like how we do here, where we'll call each other out when we have ideas we disagree with, and we'll push and we'll change if we get better info. That doesn't happen in that world very often. That's kind of what we try to create here. It's kind of what we try to create with the Capital Boot Camps, right? For Patriot Academy. And hopefully more people can learn how fantastic that is when it comes to self-growth.
Okay, let's jump into our first topic. So the other day we had a very, very long and in-depth conversation on the proper role of government. And what sparked this was our little libertarian over here on the end.
Which end?
Which end? Come on now.
Well, I guess both. I don't know.
You're surrounded.
We'll find out tonight.
On the left and the right.
Classical liberal.
That's right.
Please define
Classical
it correctly.
liberal.
Classical liberal.
Come on now.
Well, isn't there also a difference between a classical liberal and a today libertarian?
Absolutely. That's why I like to make that distinction, because I don't define myself as a libertarian.
That's fair.
And even the guys who really are seen as the founders of libertarianism would not agree with what people think of as libertarianism today, which is there's no role for
It's
government.
like anarchy.
Exactly. And that's really what modern libertarianism, not all the leaders of it, I don't think, even like Ron and Rand Paul, I don't think go as far as some of their followers do. But the guys who are looked to as having created that kind of ideology, John Stuart Mill and others, they're classical liberals. They're not really libertarians. They believe there was a role for government. It was just really, really small. And that's I think that's how I define myself, and that's how Rhett defines himself.
I think a lot of this may be off track, but a lot of people call themselves libertarian because they prefer the simple black and white government just shouldn't do anything instead of tackling the tough issues where government should do something, right? Or where society decides they want their government
it's definitely a lot easier to be libertarian or very liberal, where liberal says the government should
do everything.
It should do everything. It should be involved in everything. And libertarian is a complete other spectrum. And then there's like classical liberal, or in some cases conservative, or kind of an in between. That's very, I don't know. It's you have to think about everything a lot more. And it's
I'm somewhat making this up as I go, but I would say that's probably why I've always called myself a constitutionalist. Because it clarifies that I do think government has a role, but government's role has to be specifically defined on paper in a constitution and limited to that role. Right.
Yeah, okay, so let's go to Rhett's hypothetical neighborhood that he created the other day. And it's just kind of an exercise that we do at Patriot Academy, where we will sit down and we'll start a hypothetical government, a new society. And we start
on the island.
We're on an island, and we're going to take you guys along this journey with us. We're going to create a government.
We're all that's left.
We're all that's left.
The zombie apocalypse has occurred.
We have survived the COVID apocalypse from the vaccine that created zombies. And so now we have to decide what kind of government we're going to have. Are we going to have a constitutional republic? Are we going to have just pure anarchy? What are we going to have? So I'll pose this question to you guys. We could talk about a specific issue that as we're discussing that issue, that is then giving us examples of our fundamental worldviews. So if you guys have an issue, of course we can do the drug one. That's an easy one to go about. But if you guys have something that's going on, if there's something that's going on currently in our nation that would associate to this conversation, where we could talk about that, and then our views would be explained through that conversation. Is there anything that?
Well, here's one. Unless you have something.
I was gonna say I think we have to distinguish first of I think the level at which, or how many people the government is, under, not over, the government is under. I think that it can, play a big factor, just because of the fact that I think if it's in America today, it's going to be a lot different than a government where there's 30 of us on an island. I just think that, you can definitely keep the one representative that's or I don't even know, with 30 people, it would be so different.
Well, let's actually back up and just say for the viewers, the whole reason to have this debate is to try to come to a conclusion about what the proper role of government is. So if we're trying to figure out, if we can design it any way we want, how much involvement from government do we want? And so I always like to start that by saying, the government is us. So when we say government shouldn't do this or should do that, government is a tool of ours. Mm-hmm. And so what we're really saying is, it's no different than saying, what should the church do? What should parents be able to do? What should mechanics be able to do? What should business be able? We're literally saying government is just one of these entities in our lives if we're going to live in polite society. If we're going to actually have a community, then we're going to have a government at some level. I don't care. I used to use the analogy of Sons of Anarchy, right? I mean, a biker gang has a government. There's a council in that, even if they are, thugs, right? Even if they are ruthless, they have their own government, right? Within that biker gang. So I just want to make sure, as we're saying, what should government do, that we all realize what we're really talking about when we say government is, we're talking about the leaders of a neighborhood, the leaders of a community. What should the leaders of that community be able to do with our permission?
Yeah. Can I take it one step even further back? If we're really delving into this, then, and for a lot of people, they may have heard about this kind of through school, but nowadays it's not taught very often. Mm-hmm. But what is the reason why we even have a government in terms of social contract theory, right? So if there's one person on the island, there's no need for a government, right? That one person can collect the resources from the island, build what they want, say what they want. There's really no reason for a government to exist, right? But the moment that there are two people there, well, then you have an issue, right? Can this person take things that belong to this person, right? Do they have specific areas of land, specific agreements on how they operate, right? And the moment that you have multiple people in the equation, now you got to come up with something, right? And that's the origination of what we call social contract theory, going all the way back to the Enlightenment period and a little bit before. And so you have to ask, why do we even need that, right? We needed to protect you from me. Mm-hmm. We needed to protect all four of us from an outside force. We needed to do things that we can't do as an individual or as a small group or a non-government organization, like infrastructure, right? It's one of the few things that government is empowered to do. It's a very, very short list, but we have to be clear. There is a reason why government exists, and it's because we have to have something that we all agree to help kind of mediate between us.
We have to have rules, our social compact, and then we have to have someone that's going to enforce those rules.
Yeah. So let me ask you guys this: where do y'all draw the line of what is the government going to be protecting the collective from? Is it going to be natural disasters? Is it going to be from each other? Or do you just leave it basically every man for himself? What areas of life do you involve in the government's responsibility in protecting its people?
I'll throw this out there since this is what we were talking about a few nights ago. So my point of view is that the government should only stop individuals from being able to affect other people. They can do whatever they want to themselves, but they can't affect other people. And then,
do you still stand by that?
So I still stand on a federal level. And like I said, it depends on whether it's an island of 30 people, because then at that point it is just the people, and they can decide what they want on their island. If the other person doesn't like that, they can go to a different island. But that's the fundamental.
What if you're all trapped on that island?
Then I think that if one person disagrees with all of that, then I think that there needs to turn to sides of an island. And so in terms of America, the federal government, I think, shouldn't be able to tell you what you can do for yourself. But I think that that's where the neighborhoods come into play. And I think that it depends on whether it's state government or if it's local government. And I think we're in disagreement of where that should be.
And that is getting a little bit out of the philosophy of it and more into the constitutional aspect.
I mean, it's the technical aspect for sure, but I think
in terms of like your philosophical view,
right.
So stick with the island for a second rather than the federal state.
That's so tough, because I think as long as the people come together and agree or
we'll make it more practical. So let's say there's 1,000 people on the island. Let's say we're in the TV show Lost, and there's 4 jumbo jets that have landed on this island with 250 people each.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So there's 1,000 people there. So you would need some rules.
Yeah.
And you would need a way to enforce those rules. yet you also want to protect liberty and the individual's responsibility and the individual's freedom.
So let me present you with this. Say 999 people decide to put to death somebody that none of them like, but he's not presenting a danger or a present danger to them. They think he might be a little bit loony, and you don't know what he's going to do, but say he hasn't done anything yet.
Yeah.
They can't go anywhere. They're trapped on the island, and 999 people vote to just put him to death, to prevent the possibility of him hurting anybody else.
Bro, I don't think...
Which, for those of you that are reading, that would be the Lord of the Flies, and they're about to kill Piggy.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think that they should be able to say that, but you guys do, right? Because under what y'all are saying, what y'all are saying is that as long as the majority of people that decide what you can and cannot do.
No, that's what you're saying.
Yeah,
I'm saying there needs to be a constitution that everybody agrees on in the first place that protects his right to life.
And we should back
was
up.
Pure democracy. So if 999 being able to put the one to death for no reason other than they just don't like them, and they can change, to do anything that they want in terms of the rules, would be considered pure democracy. Whereas that's why I was kind of dropping the little hint about we need to not just talk about what government should do, but how do we protect individualism and liberty, because those are fundamental rights. And so if you have a tyranny, if you have totalitarianism, then there are no fundamental rights. Government does everything that it wants to do.
The whole point of the social contract is to uphold those rights. If it doesn't do that, there's no point.
It's the very purpose. Let's quote the Declaration for a second. So the American ideal is that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So the whole reason to have governments instituted among, so if we're going to create a government on this island with 1,000 people, the main reason is to secure our rights, to keep you from stealing my coconuts on this island, right? Or to keep us from killing Reagan just because we decide that
you're just too good looking.
Too good looking.
Gosh,
we don't want the competition. And so,
So here's my question: is if there is a new substance that's found on the island that produces a fantastic high, but it takes you out for the day, it creates laziness, it creates an addiction to that substance, suddenly we can come together and we can say this substance is no longer allowed on this island, correct? For y'all's point of view.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say
so what if...
But that should be done only within the jurisdictions that the Constitution gives the government in the first place.
No, well, but what y'all's jurisdiction is for y'all's Constitution is that y'all can regulate someone from doing something for themselves if y'all deem it so.
If it's viewed that it actually harms more than just that person.
Okay, so what if Jimmy Jimmy has his own plot of land, has his own food source, his own resources, his own making, but he finds this substance that gives him that high, and it's only affecting him. It literally isn't affecting anyone else. Are y'all allowed to tell him that he cannot have that substance?
Well, this is where I think we...
Answer the question.
I know. I'm about
Don't
to.
circle back to it. Sasaki, whatever her name is.
Hold on. I know.
Okay.
This is where you have to go back even further, because should government be based off of any particular religious set of views? Should it be based off of a law that is higher than human law, that is higher than anything that we could come up with or decide? George Washington said our government only works for religious and moral people, because within that system, you have to have, in order for that to be justified, it has to align with what we would say is God's rules, God's law, God's design for humans. So I would
say that. So what if the island isn't, though?
But the argument,
if you've got 1,000 people that don't believe in God, then you look at all of human history, that's going to go to hell. That's going to end up at anarchy.
I think you can make that argument without having to even refer to a particular religion.
Yeah.
The founders said the laws of nature and nature's God, and even on that island, we would figure out the laws of nature and nature's God if that substance, if we're going to use that substance, right? So let's say that we start to observe that it really makes that guy go crazy. And that it's actually affecting. I'm just saying, if we
but
don't,
you're taking out of my
if
situation.
we don't observe, if we start saying, if we don't know anything about it, right, it hasn't been used at all until this guy found it, then I would argue, if I were on the council of this island, that let's see what it does. Let's find out.
Sorry, I'm messing with the mic, but I keep
put it more sideways.
Okay.
Not straight up.
It was.
To where it lays
for some reason, but okay. Anyways,
I would argue. I mean, in your hypothetical, we don't know anything about this substance, right?
Well,
so we would say
no. In my hypothetical, we do know what it produces a high. Let's say it is like marijuana, or say
can we just go specific? It's marijuana.
Yeah,
can we just
it's
do that?
marijuana. It produces. It's marijuana, and so in this situation, Jimmy discovered it, loves it, can't stop smoking it, and so he smokes it. And it's to the point to where he isn't like taking care of himself very well. He doesn't know anybody else, but y'all are concerned for y'all's neighbor, right? So y'all come together and y'all tell Jimmy that he can no longer smoke marijuana. Is that a fair for y'all to say that?
It depends. I mean,
I gave you the situation. What else does it depend on?
Well, because I would want to know if I were going to make that.
It seems like you're trying not to get trapped into a corner. This is. Are you conservative?
I'm just.
So okay, wait. Can we back up real quick?
All right, go for it.
We got to create some parameters around this conversation. Can we agree that if the substance was so bad that the first time that you used it, you died, we'd say that probably is not allowed?
Yes.
Well,
can we agree just to create some parameters on what government can and cannot do?
Okay.
Is there any line where government can say a substance that only impacts you?
I don't know.
So I think I love the way I keep quoting him, but John Stuart Mill, I love the way he thinks upon this. He does say that there are some things so bad done only to the individual that they do impact the rest of society in terms of, so like suicide, for example, it impacts tons of people beyond yourself, right? And that's the reason that for so long in human history, it has been vehemently opposed, right? So there are some things that I think we can argue that even if it's only done to you as an individual, is still so bad for society as a whole that we do have, in a majority rule, right? If society agrees upon it, come in and ban it.
Okay.
There's also some things.
Can I just ask though, like in terms of suicide, if like say Jimmy was like, he was a war vet from the World War. From this island that occurred, whatever, how many years ago, whatever. He has injuries or something that he's in so much pain, he can't take it, and he wants to end his life. Is it justified for the 1,000 people to agree to stop Jimmy from ending his own life and to restrain him?
That is the question that is debated when a state decides whether or not to
physician-assisted suicide
to stop suicide, right? So do we have a public policy on our island that if we know Jimmy's about to go in there and take his life, that we would stop him from doing that? That we would friends of his would go in and literally physically restrain him and say, no, we're going to try to get your head right because life is precious and we don't think that you should take your life.
Yeah, and
so that's a public policy decision. Right now in most places in America and frankly around the world, there is some level of allowable government intervention to stop you from taking your life. So if we know you're about to do it, we can physically take that gun from you or take that pill from you or whatever it might be and try to prevent you. Now that's very hard to do, right? Unless you institutionalize somebody, they're going to find a way to take their life. But do we make an effort?
But do we make an effort?
I think that's the only way you can answer that is if you're a nation based off of a moral law higher than yourself. We all have to collectively agree we do believe we're doing this because we think life is precious inherently, and we get that from God's law. And now that's where I don't know that if you're not a nation that believes that inherent value of life, is it still then the proper role of government to restrain somebody from committing suicide, or is it not? I would say it would be a proper role if your government and your nation does believe that life is inherently valuable. So is the proper role of government contingent on the fundamental values that the nation believes in, or we're trying to find that?
Yeah, I mean, there's values, there's laws of nature that no government can go around, right? And then there are the laws that can differ based on society. I do want to kind of separate out. I don't think you have to be religious to recognize the laws of nature, if that makes sense, right? So even if this society is only half religious, there are still going to be laws of nature, such as the value of life, that people are going to realize inherently. Yeah. And we see that. We see that even in non-religious nations. And so when it comes to an issue like suicide, I think we just need to be careful. That's not a purely religious issue, even though for us it is, because we believe that human beings are made in God's image, and therefore we don't have the right to take that. Yeah. But I think that's a law of nature that doesn't have to necessarily be tied to religion, if that makes sense.
So what do you do then when a nation's fundamental values or worldview is what we would say is flawed, and say they believe in things like allowing rape because women are lesser than men, or they are allowing...
I mean, it's wrong. I have no problem making that judgment.
So this is kind of going off topic, but it is answering the question of would that government or would that nation's government be what we would call philosophically proper? So should we then interfere in that nation's doings if they're committing mass genocide?
That's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
You're saying should we go to another island and stop things that we think are wrong that are being done there?
Yes,
right?
And so can you answer that as in, like, if you were going to say, yes, we should, if they were doing such and such, would that be because their government is not proper, or they're not fitting the proper role of what government should be?
As much as I want to find the answer to that question, I kind of want to watch that promo that you were talking about.
What?
We are getting close to our time. We got to take a quick little break here and get a word from our sponsor. No, that'd be cool. I wish I had a sponsor, but no, yeah. But hey, listen, if
there's anybody who knows anybody that owns a cigar company,
yeah, come on now,
yes, please send them our way.
Come on.
No, but
Actually, oh, never mind. Okay.
Well, let me just get to this promo real quick. If you are of my age range, 16 to 25, and you want to dive really deep into these discussions with like-minded people and get into a great community of Christian conservatives, I would say, then you definitely need to come attend Patriot Academy. And here's a quick little promo highlight reel of what that looks like. Watch this.
I'm focused. I've been watching for the omens. I've been listening to everything you said. It's been running through my head, locked and loaded. I got the feeling that you know it. Yeah, I've only just begun. I won't stop until it's done, till you're broken. So welcome to the fire. I'm the one with the lighter. Feel it burning through your veins as we're walking through the flames, getting higher. So welcome to the fire. Welcome to the fire. Feel it burning through your veins as we're walking through the flames, getting higher. So welcome to the fire.
All right, so that's a quick look at Patriot Academy, and that was actually of our National Patriot Academy in Texas. And if you're going to go to any of them, I would highly recommend coming to that one. It's the biggest one, it's the longest one, and we get so many great speakers and people there to participate. So
unfortunately, no smoking of cigars.
Yes, unfortunately.
Come hang out with us.
Yeah, if you'd like to do that. Well, you have to be invited, so you have to be a special person.
You have to be like Charles Spurgeon and smoke your cigar to the glory of God.
That's right. Hey, I was gonna ask you, in Parliament, is it like, can they smoke pipes? Because I like
they used to.
Okay,
really? I don't know.
Right.
Well, and even I might be wrong on this, but I think even in the Texas legislature,
they used to smoke and drink in the break room. I know.
Yeah, you used to do that, and then I think as a member, I think in your office you can choose.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Now I don't know if you have to pay to have walls taken out and stuff like that to start smelling like smoke, but whichever one of y'all two gets elected in the future.
Yeah, right. Oh,
Trey, I think
you. I'm about to say you're the most likely elected representative in the future.
All right, so go to patriotacademy.com and check out that if you want to go attend a Patriot Academy.
I forgot the cameras were rolling.
Okay, so
although I appreciate your line of thinking, I do think we need to back up and get back to our original conversation of just getting our island right before we start looking at
let me broach back to that 30,000 feet view. What's the proper role of government, right?
Sorry.
And that we're trying to protect liberty.
Yeah.
So some old school definitions from Webster's 1828 dictionary, which would have been the mindset of the founding fathers, right? So Noah Webster was actually an important part of the revolution. He was the one that got certain things put into the Constitution. Anyway, bottom line is he said that true liberty, pure liberty,
try not to slam on the table,
in a state of nature.
He's passionate.
I'm passionate, yes.
Okay, wait, this is... No, that's not
true.
I apologize if you're listening.
True liberty, pure liberty in a state of nature has no restraints other than nature. So if you're the one guy on the island like you're talking about, the only thing that's going to restrain your liberty is some animal or the weather or other things in nature, right, that are stronger than you, that keep you from being able to go to a certain part of the island because of whatever. Okay, that's pure liberty. But when that other person shows up, and maybe we all show up, or there's 1,000 of us now on the island, if we're going to live in civil liberty, then we have to have certain restraints on our pure liberty. In other words, I can't now take the coconuts off of your part of the island. I can't now, do certain things. Yeah. And he said back then that the only thing we would restrain or keep you from being able to do would be something that would harm the society as a whole, right? That it would be necessary to do so in order to have the protection of the overall community and secure the rights of everybody else on the island, which pretty well fits what you're saying.
Yeah, I was about to say, that sounds very libertarian.
But then the question becomes, what is harming the whole society? Where you would say Jimmy committing suicide or doing hard drugs or I know you said marijuana, but if he was doing whatever, right? That what he's doing on his little corner of the island is not affecting the rest of the society.
So to sound fancy, and I've learned this from you, the technical term is an externality, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Or is that?
So we are going to get very specific about that, but it's an economic term talking about there's consumption and production externalities, where if you consume something where you get all the benefits but all the costs go to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's an externality. So like an example that people would kind of realize is like a manufacturing plant that puts off like a smog that causes cancer in the neighborhood.
Right. They're harming their neighbor.
They're harming their neighbor.
Right.
They're getting all the benefits and they're not having to take on any of the costs of the neighborhood. So that is where government does have a role to play. Now nowadays people call everything externalities, right? And so it's taken way beyond what it's actually meant to mean. But you are going along the right lines of thought.
So, and I'll just throw this out there. This is kind of getting into the difference between liberty and licentiousness, and letting your nation, letting your people get completely corrupted with wickedness, even if it's just themselves. Do we want to allow our people on an individual level to ruin their life with hardcore drugs? And if you allow that, if you open the door for that, Michael Knowles would say you're no longer a nation that can have civil liberty, true liberty, because you're a nation of corrupt and wicked people. And so you can't be a nation that protects your God-given rights. So
Can I just say
let's expound on that difference between liberty and
I feel like that becomes
so
subjective then. It's just like the line is so blurry to that point of anybody could say that, living by godly principles is being corrupt. And so then it just it falls into whatever the majority of the people believe.
So is the proper role of government subjective?
Wait, no, I got to ask this question. If you had the chance to create essentially a theocracy, is that what your ideal form of government?
For those that aren't...
If you had, let's take it more realistic. If you had a church that could lead a nation, is that your preferred form of government?
No, because
that's kind of what it sounds like you're saying, and so I want to get back up to that.
It's who was the biblical king that mandated everyone must be a Christian or you're put to death?
It
was 50 years after Jesus left or something.
No, you're talking about a Roman king.
Yeah, a Roman king.
Emperor, one of the Caesars.
So you're saying that a religious view, everybody has to follow this religious view.
Yeah, well, so let's just take it practically, right? So the Church of England, the power that it held, is that something that you view as something good? Or any of the nations where there was battles between religion, right? So here's where I'm kind of going to push back on you. I don't view government in the form that we're talking about in today's society. Obviously, the ideal form of government is God ruling over us, right? We're the ones that ask for the stupid form of government where we can rule ourselves at first. If God ruled over us, that'd be wonderful and everything, but that's not the world that we live in. I don't think I would want religious precepts being required at a federal level. I do think religion 100% can be involved in politics and should influence politics. But in terms of we're going to make everybody abide by Christian principles, I don't think I would agree 100% with that. There are most of them that I would, but not 100%.
Well, yeah, and I'm not saying everybody has to, that by law you have to practice a certain religion. But, and again, I guess what you were saying was some kind of religious precepts you would want to base the government off of, but not all of them. So I guess Rhett was right. This is where it becomes a subjective
It is
view.
subjective. It is subjective.
Exactly.
Because I would say I do
which
want
is where I would say the less amount of government, the better.
But I would say I do want a government that is going to say Judeo-Christian principles are going to be in our laws. Not murdering is a Judeo-Christian
100%
principle.
agree. Yeah,
not
sure.
stealing
Yeah.
is a Judeo-Christian principle. Not lying in a way that commits fraud or lying under oath, those kind of things. Not those are biblical ideas, and so I would say yes, you do want religious principles to be in government, but you don't want. The reason we believe in a separation of church and state, not the way it's been perverted by the courts today, but an institutional separation of the official church is one body, government is another body. But the church is influencing the culture so that the culture elects people that share those values of we shouldn't murder each other, we shouldn't steal, that sort of thing. So that's where I would kind of explain the difference. I don't want a theocracy, and I don't want the church to be the government or the government to be the church, but I do want the church to be such salt and light and influence, and I want the government to allow for such freedom that the church can do that. Right. Now, other people can, of course, speak their piece. I mean, that's the problem with cancel culture right now is if you're not part of what the popular opinion is, you're not even allowed to speak. And that used to be a real pride thing in Americans that we, even if you totally disagree with me, that I'll hear you out and I'll fight and die so that you can say whatever crazy thing you might believe that I might disagree with. That's not the case.
But y'all are saying that Jimmy can't do some of those things that he wants to do. That in this case doesn't affect other people.
That's not speech, though. I was arguing for speech.
Well, and that is where we bring it all back, right? So the argument that you could make under not what we're talking about, where religion influences politics and the culture, but under what I kind of thought you were indicating, and maybe you're not, where religious precepts of a particular religion are the law of the land, then you wouldn't have anything like you're talking about under certain religions.
Yeah.
And so what I would argue is that although it should be influencing mainly the culture, and then principles like murder, etc., are within there, I think there's a lot of freedom that needs to be left to the individual that if religion were to control government would not be the case.
So let me make a general statement real quick. Okay, so you can't, at least the founders of America believed, you could not have a free people that wasn't also a religious and moral people.
Yeah.
I mean, John Adams specifically said our form of government will only work for a moral and religious people. George Washington said religion and morality are indispensable supports of political prosperity. That you cannot have liberty if you don't have morality, and you can't have morality if you don't have religion. So all of that to say, if in general, the history of the world shows us that if you don't have what you're talking about, Judeo-Christian values influencing the culture and driving the policies of the government, then freedom will not last because a free people must be moral and religious. Is why America's falling apart right now. Yeah. Because we ran away from freedom, away from religion and morality 50, 60 years ago. And what always happens when you get rid of religion and morality is you get what we're seeing right now, silencing of other people's beliefs, which is limiting freedom, right? We're taking away freedom because it's no longer religious and moral. We're allowing for rioting in the streets. We're allowing for chaos. What happens the longer you allow for that, the sooner you want some government figure that's saying, I'll make that pain stop, just give me the power to do it. Yeah. And it leads to a dictator. And that's what's happened throughout history. That's how we got Hitler. That's how we got Stalin. Yeah. That's how we got Pol Pot. I mean, you just go through all of history, and so it ends up being way, way worse. So all of that is a history lesson to say government's necessary, and religious and moral values influencing that government is necessary if you want to have liberty and you want to have freedom on the island.
Yeah, so we don't want the Crusades, where you had the Catholic Church killing people, and you don't want the French Revolution, where they said where you said no
the
religion. So there's where's the middle ground between those two?
And it's subjective. It really is, and that's where we come together on the island and say, how far do we want government to go? Okay, what are the things that are so bad? And actually, we should answer that question first. Is there anything so bad that we wouldn't want it to be allowed on the island? Even if we initially think it only affects that person.
And this is where I think the proper role of government would be that for the whole island, that there isn't anything that we can tell individuals that they can and cannot do, but that that there should be sides of the island that come together, make rules, say if you're going to live on this side of the island, you can't do this, you can't do that, so that it's you can have choices, because it will always be subjective, and it could be in the wrong side of things. Even though I don't think people should do cocaine or heroin, I think that there will be people that think that you, for instance, shouldn't be able to smoke a cigar, and so that I think that it could go
like your mom.
Yeah, for sure, exactly.
Well,
no, exactly.
And that's, you're making the point exactly that I was going to bring up, is that, I mean, I've heard elected officials say if they had the power, they would ban tobacco.
Yeah.
Right. That's their line. Right. Is going that far. And so that's the danger that I think kind of more like Rhett and I are trying to avoid, is having a line that's so, what's the word I'm looking for? Fungible? Is that the right word? Or like movable?
Yeah.
That it can be pushed that far.
And so let me add the other danger. Yeah. The danger of being so afraid of how far it could go that you don't go anywhere. In other words, you don't outlaw anything. You don't have you go for total licentiousness because you're afraid of the power of government becoming too strong, which is why representative government is so important, and being active in that government is so important, constantly trying to influence where the line is. And that's the great debate. That's why the American system works so well, because you have these deliberative bodies where we elect people, we send them to Congress or to the state legislature or to the city council, and they go vigorously debate those issues and decide based on, okay, if Jimmy's the only guy that's used that and it hasn't harmed him, why in the world would we prevent anybody from using it? It's fine. He should use it. If it has and it creates chaos and it creates problems, at some point the government of that island, because the people would say, you got to stop letting people use this because it's destroying families, it's destroying whatever. If that was to happen, woo, that's awesome. Then they would say, I try to take your
we should outlaw that. That should never happen again.
Anyway, so that's the fun part to me of government, is actually figuring out where's that line, and it will be different for different people. But I would say also agree that you should not be able to tell that other government or that other side of the island how to live. Right. And that's why right now, I mean, look, let's face it, there are places on the planet, a lot of places on the planet, where you can marry off your daughter at 12 years old. Now, we don't think that's okay. Right. And I would hope that America would not say that's okay. And I would hope that even a really, firm libertarian would not say that that's okay.
Yeah.
Even if the 12-year-old daughter agrees. Right, so we would all agree there has to be some level of adulthood and consent, right? And so we would put that in our laws, that you can't agree to sell your body or to be married or do those things unless you're at a certain age, right? So, and then we may say you can't sell your body, right? We have most states in America say no prostitution. I think Nevada's the only one that it's legal.
But
so
there's such a big push to legalize that too. I mean, that is an important debate. And the interesting thing is the biggest group that's pushing that is the feminist lobby.
Yeah, I know.
Pushing it. So, I mean, what's y'all's answer on that? What do y'all think? I have kind of my initial thoughts, but I haven't thought about it very much.
Okay, I thought
this is where I come back to. I base those decisions based on the Bible, and if it goes against the Bible, then I don't think it.
The prostitution was allowed.
So let me push back on that in two ways. Number one, just what Dad said, and then number two, if that's the main standard, then anything we do, whether it's smoking a cigar, whether it's eating a fatty hamburger, anything that is not taking care of the temple should be outlawed as well. Right, and so that's where the subjective line comes into play.
So here's where I would argue with you if we were in the legislature, right? That I agree those things are not bad enough that we should outlaw it. Even though Michael Bloomberg thinks we shouldn't be allowed to get a big gulp. Right? I mean, he wants to have big gulps.
That is such a deep reference. I feel like most people won't catch that. You're referencing Parks and Rec?
No, that's true. Michael Bloomberg was mayor of New York and wanted to outlaw 44-ounce big
That wasn't just a joke.
No, he wanted you to have a limitation. The government was going to decide how much soda you could sell at a time.
Okay, and listen, and here's... To take it back to the academia, right, and the way that they justify things, they'll justify that by saying, well, if you drink too much of this and you get too unhealthy, then you're going to be a drain on public resources, which you shouldn't be anyways. That's a whole other discussion about.
You can always take it to that. You can always argue at some level that even if you're not exercising enough every day, government should be able to force you, right?
That's the ridiculousness of that line of logic.
But that's also why that's why it's easier for a libertarian to say we just shouldn't do anything, right? But then I would bring it back to prostitution. I would say that I would make the argument and use studies to show it is, even though it is a freedom issue, that person decides, male or female, if they want to sell their body, right? I would argue that is so detrimental to society, and that it does hurt society so much when you legalize it and you say this is okay for you to do this. You will get more of it. There will be more damage to more men and women that do sell their bodies, and more damage to families and the culture wherever that's allowed. And I would make those arguments in the legislature.
Here's my question.
And say, this is something that if you want to go somewhere else and do it, fine.
Right.
But in our community, on our island, we're not going to
Okay,
allow
that's the question, though. Our community, in terms of the island, would it be, you'd argue that on the different sides of the island, or would that be for the whole island itself?
Whatever level of government I represent. Whatever,
okay, we'll say
whatever
you
level
represent,
of government I'm part of.
Okay, but on a philosophy note, do you think that that should be decided for the whole island, or that should be decided for different sides of the island?
If the different sides of the island have different governments,
then
you can only
basically it's like states, right? So states ruled under the
so
federal
in
government.
that
So
case,
would
it
you
has
pass
to be.
that on the federal government?
But that's an important question. Are you saying that
It has to be
that
state
this
by state.
island has
That's what I'm
two
thinking.
separate governments, or are you saying that the island has two separate states but what we're saying we are under the same?
Yes, that's what I'm
Joint
saying.
government.
That's what I'm saying. So would you pass that for the federal government for the whole island, or would that be something decided for the states?
It depends on what the Constitution, the
I
charter,
would
whatever
say
it
there's
is.
a lot
that
of
we-
variables
yeah.
there. If you want to put it in the context of the United States system now,
Okay, sure, yeah.
I would say that I would probably not argue for that at the federal level, the national level, because the Constitution doesn't give the federal government the authority to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas I would argue for it at the state level and allow the states to decide for themselves.
Fair enough.
Which is how we have it now,
Yeah.
and it works pretty well.
Yeah.
right? Even though one state has it, and I think the impact on like sex trafficking is so heavy from that,
Right.
that there's a strong argument.
And
to
we'll
get rid
fight
of it.
against it.
There's
It
an
is,
Yeah, I
argument-
don't think it should be instituted on a federal level.
And,
today.
and,
Exactly.
and very important for people that are watching that may not have these kind of conversations very often. The reason I come down there is because our form of federalism means that we have a federal government that only does a few things, and then we have 50 states, and each of them get to decide most issues on their own. And the way the founders described that was most things that are internal, meaning it's only happening in your state, that's all your decision. Nobody else should get to have an influence on that. But if it's external, meaning that it's like war, another country is going to attack our whole island or our whole nation, or something's crossing state lines, then at that point the federal government should have some level of influence and voice in that. So that's federalism, which is getting way, way off of where we were in terms of what's the proper role of government. But it's important to know the proper role of government changes depending on which government we're talking about, because government has jurisdictions, it has boundaries, it has lines. Part of our problem today is that we just expect every level of government to solve every problem in our life, and we don't remember that this government has this jurisdiction, so the federal government has certain things, the state government has certain things, your local government has certain, and your family is a government, your church is in a way a government of that body of believers. And so, anyway, I'm rambling.
Well, taking it back
No,
to our island, though, let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah,
So
let's do it.
if we had 1,000 people on there, there's a very good chance, regardless of how big the island is, that we would split up into, let's just say, let's call them states, four states of 250 people each, that each have a different outlook on life. And they all agree to have one big government that's underneath them that would do what? Just repel invaders, probably.
Well,
right?
and honestly, and this is where I think that the pure stance of the federal government says you cannot affect other people. And I think for you it becomes subjective that the externalities of drugs or whatever could affect other people. But I think in this it's like specifically affecting other people, as in like, I went over and I stole your coconut, or I dug a ditch on your land, or I harmed you in some way.
What is that term? There's a term for that. It's a direct or a...
Well, and the issue,
I know what you're saying.
The issue here, though, on these issues is that, like, we don't know if there's an externality, right?
Oh,
so in terms of, like, we don't know in this case, right, if he's smoking pot, that one guy, we don't know if it's impacting the rest of the island.
Sure.
Like what you're saying, which is we kind of have to wait and see. It could, right, if half the island is doing it and half the island's not working, but let's say we have a social system that allows them to live that lifestyle, which is what we have today.
For that state?
Yeah, for each of the states, right? We have a system nowadays that allows people to live lifestyles that are detrimental and then they leech off of the rest of society.
But here's
right?
the thing,
So
with the state, like, side of government, then that state is going to fail. And so all the productive members of society, having the, lazy ones leech off of them, they're just going to move to a different state. And so I think that's where the states obviously come into play.
But at that point, it could be a big enough detriment that the 51% say this just isn't
Here's
allowed.
what I
Of the state or the federal government?
We're just talking about the states at this point make it. The federal government only handles, let's just say, defense.
Okay, so, the states coming together decide for other states?
No. I'm saying one state.
Okay.
If half of its population is smoking this plant,
Oh, for sure.
and not becoming productive, at that point, it's worth a conversation to say, okay, this thing is so detrimental to
For the
our
state.
to our
For
state.
that state.
Oh,
to our
100%.
state.
Yeah. That's
and
not-
then if
yeah.
all states do it, that's perfectly fine.
And if
At
I'm a
that
neighboring
point-
state and I'm
Yeah.
watching all,
Yeah.
all your people be lazy because
Exactly.
of this and not work,
Exactly.
then I may say, you know what, we're not going to let that happen in
For our state. Yeah,
in
exactly.
our state. So we're not going to.
That's where I think a reasonable line exists, right? When it's under that kind of, whatever you want to call it, scientific method, policy evaluation, that
Okay.
I think is a reasonable line.
I-
If it's not to that level,
Uh-huh.
then I do think we have to say, well, it's not really making a big impact on us at all.
I need a whiteboard because this is so
I have an
confusing.
extremely important question.
Okay, what's up?
Is there any part of this island where I can start
This is a
my own
joke.
state and not allow masks?
I knew it. I knew it.
No
His
masks
punchline
can be
somewhere. There
required.
we
I
go.
guess they could be allowed,
Yeah.
but not required. Actually, there was a time when we didn't allow you to wear a mask into a bank because you're probably going to rob it.
Yeah, right.
Now you can't go into a bank without.
Yeah,
okay,
it's
never
true.
mind. All right, I don't want to get off on my.
So I think
Hatred of
I think we
masks.
can all agree, and y'all have kind of changed my perspective on this from the beginning of the podcast. I was kind of under the
that's what
impression.
it's about.
these conversations
That's
are
what
for.
it's
Yeah,
about.
so-
Iron sharpening iron.
I was
We're
under the
supposed to change his mind.
We converted
Let's
one.
go, yeah.
Dad, it's just you at this point.
I'm losing.
Well, all y'all's mics just peaked dramatically.
Sorry.
No. So I was kind of under the impression at the beginning of this that there is some kind of utopian perfect form of government that we have yet to discover.
Interesting.
And I think what we've all kind of agreed on is that if you're going to have any kind of civil government, there's going to be different levels to it, and those different levels are going to be different forms of government. And even on each level, it's going to be a subjective thing based on what the society thinks is right or wrong. So no matter what your society is, there's not going to be a perfect utopian form of government.
Right.
So you can't really say there is I guess you could say the proper role of government would be whatever the society determined it was.
It is, yeah.
I will quote Benjamin Franklin on this, that our constitutional Republican form of government is the worst form of government other than every other one.
That's so true.
And it just means there's no utopia. In fact, that is actually typically the failure of liberalism is that they believe in a utopia.
Modern liberalism.
Not classical liberalism.
Yeah.
More of a leftist view.
Leftist, progressive
leftists
leftist,
typically
yeah,
believe
yeah.
that there is a way to create a utopia. If you'll just do everything our way, we'll have a utopia. A book assignment for everybody, including you.
Yeah.
A Meritopia by Mark Levin. If you'll read a Meritopia, it will take you through Plato's Republic. It'll take you through all of these attempts to design the utopia and the recognition that there is no such thing. And therefore you need a government that is that answers to the people, and they can change it as they see fit, right? And frankly, America is changing in a way that we're not happy about, right? But if the nation has become so immoral and such a lover of socialism and the idea that I can take what you have worked for and that becomes the new government of America, we're going to get outvoted on that.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to find our side of the island where we can have a state or an area that redesigns that form of government or reinstitutes at least what the founders viewed. And the founders knew there was no perfect government, but they were students. They did what we're doing right now. For years before they did the Declaration of Independence, they sat around in taverns smoking cigars. Okay,
Yeah.
That was C.S. Lewis and J.K. Rowling.
And then who was it? It was John Quincy Adams.
Oh yeah.
He started smoking cigars when he was like 12 years old or something.
Really?
Yeah.
We don't
recommend that. Okay.
They did have a lot of tobacco in Virginia.
I forget what it was. There's a great biography on him, and he talks about.
But they did drink beer in the taverns,
Well, they did.
It was very little alcohol. It wasn't the beer very, very little. But my point was they sat around and they talked about this stuff and they read the books. They read every form of government that had ever existed. And so they learned from all that and went, okay, wait a minute, how far should we go? Right. What should be the way we do this? And they literally created something that had never been done before. I mean, not the way we did it. And anyway, so there's no perfect government. You're 100% right.
And so I think that's also a really good distinction between modern leftism and conservatism. Leftists are constantly chasing that utopian society at the expense of people's individual liberties. And conservatives are saying, we recognize that's not a thing. We can't get to a utopian society or government. So our only job is going to be to conserve the liberties that people do have now. And we're not going to sacrifice each other in search of this higher form of government that doesn't actually exist.
Since we've been defining so many terms, or trying to define or creating our own definition, I should say, even conservatism doesn't work as a term anymore because you're conserving something. Right? We conservatives have been trying to conserve the American way of life, conserve our constitutional republic. We've lost that battle now. The culture is against us. So now,
and a lot of conservatives who claim to be conservatives don't fall within how we would define that.
Right. Yeah. So I think we do have to. I don't even think I'm going to call myself a conservative anymore. I'm gonna
classical liberal. Come on.
Well, classical liberal or constitutionalist. You know, and another good book assignment would be. Wow, how did I just blank on his name? Used to be the president of. I've had him on my radio program a million times. But the book is called Let's see, how did he say it? Why I'm a Liberal and Other Conservative Ideas. In other words, he's a classical liberal.
Okay, so before you get into that, let's go to our next promo. I want you guys to watch this and then go sign up for our new Biblical Citizenship in Modern America course or class. This is Patriot Academy's new class that we're offering. Take a quick look at this.
Free.
It is free. Yes, very important. And then I want you guys to definitely go sign up for a class. Take a quick look at this promo.
President Ronald Reagan once said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." That statement is more true now than ever before.
Biblical principles are what produce freedom in society, but you won't have biblical principles in society in which you don't have citizens with a biblical worldview.
The truth of the matter is most Americans don't have a biblical worldview, which means that they have to draw on, or they've chosen to draw on, other worldviews that are available to them.
The further we move away from biblical principles, the further we move away from liberty and freedom.
Remember in the Old Testament, after the scripture had been hidden for so long and it was brought out and it was read before the people, the people wept with joy.
That's right.
Because there's freedom in the law.
I found over the years that the only really reliable matrix to reality is the biblical blueprint.
We've relegated to say, look, politics is dirty. That's what pastors say. Politics is dirty. I don't do politics. Well, the church is dirty. What's your point?
There's so many people today that are educated at institutions where they come out as secular humanists. And so there's no fear of God.
If you're a Christian, a person of faith, you must care about what's happening in our culture. You must get involved in voting.
No, the Constitution is so unique. It is the only Constitution that actually limits government.
So in other words, if you put bad people into a broken structure, you're going to get bad results. If you have a bad system, you elect good people, they go into a bad system, you're still going to get a bad result.
The founders knew this nation was already very diverse. Federalism allows that diversity to flourish.
And you begin to love what God loves and hate what He hates in the scriptures because your heart is lining up with the heart of God because of the gospel.
It is astounding to me how many people in America have been indoctrinated into a condition of complete ignorance.
I think biblical citizenship as a Christian would be stewardship. That God has given us this republic to be stewards over.
In terms of actually having a biblical perspective on things, even in terms of believing that the Bible is a trustworthy document to give them guidance for their future, most Americans are not in that place.
As people are experiencing tyranny, they're asking why, what has happened, and there's just this feeling of being lost right now and not knowing where to turn. And you just gave us the foundation. This is truth.
All right, guys, so I I forgot what you were saying before we went to the promo.
It was wise.
It was very wise. It was very wise.
Well, it was some kind of truth bomb.
I do want to build upon what y'all are talking about with these different visions and way of viewing the world, because I do think this is very important. And I know that I've added his books to y'all's read list like a million times. I don't know if y'all have read them. Did you read Thomas Sowell's Vision of the Anointed?
Oh, no, not yet.
Okay. So
that was a little too heavy for me at the time.
Well, and it's such it just expands your mind. But he's obviously the biggest influence on my life. But he has two books here that are important: A Conflict of Visions and then Vision of the Anointed. It was basically, he wanted to answer why it was that people tended to fall radically on one side or the other of a lot of issues, whereas you don't often see, I agree with you on 50% of things. It's mostly like 80, 90%, or you disagree 80, 90%. And so what he kind of did was, he in his view, he said, I think people have two different visions of the world, and he called them constrained and unconstrained, and then he later kind of changed it to tragic and utopian. And it basically, so it goes along with what we're talking about here, where you either on one side of it, if you're the utopian kind of way of viewing the world, you think that man is naturally good from birth, that there is a perfect world out there, and that you can get to a point in this kind of climb of self-development to where you now have a higher moral authority than others and can then make decisions for everybody else. Whereas the constrained view, the tragic view, kind of what we would all define ourselves, is that man is naturally sinful, right? Corrupt from the start, and that it's only number one through religion, and then number two through a set of rules and laws that keeps us from harming each other, that allows us to flourish. And the biggest thing here is that there's trade-offs to everything. It's a constrained world. There's no perfect outcome.
Right.
Everything that we do is going to either make things great here and a little bit less great here, or a lot less here with only a little bit of benefits, which is what government tends to do nowadays, right? And so the reason that that's important is it's bringing us back to this conversation where if we ban something on this island, it might infringe on the liberty of somebody a little bit, but it's going to have this massive outcome for society as a whole. The threshold to hit that's pretty high, but I just think that vision of how you see the world, it does exist. I think that's important, right? That utopian viewpoint, number one, it's never worked, right? That's the funny thing, isn't it? There's never been one society that's tried that, that's actually worked, but so many people believe it nowadays. And for the viewer, and then even for us as we're continuing to build our own philosophy, we have to keep that in mind on whether or not that's possible. I am like 100% on what he calls the constrained or tragic view. I think that is absolutely correct. But it's important. I think a lot of people view the world the other way. And I think that's just important to keep in this. That's kind of my own little rant there, building off what you said.
Well, in Rhett's defense, there's also the danger, the unintended consequence, that Jimmy was actually Elon Musk, and if he was smoking that pot, he would have a vision of how to build a rocket to get us off the island in the first place.
He may create a podcast like Joe Rogan. Jimmy might create
wild, dude.
Rogan's like the one guy that I think like smoking the pot works for.
Yeah,
him. Like,
somehow.
He's like taking off with it.
That's funny.
And that is the interesting thing, right? Everything that we do in life impacts individuals differently, and there can be something that for a lot of people is negative, that for some people it's not. Policy-wise, I don't know how you bring that into the equation, but I think that's where we have to be cautious about restricting liberty. Rather than energetic, which progressives often are, we have to view it with caution.
Amen. I agree. And you made a huge point that might have been missed, and that is the fact that everything has trade-offs. And what we, right now, everybody runs to government to solve some problem, and they don't think of the unintended consequences. And I mean, COVID's the perfect example. We're living it out right now, where basically all governments on the entire planet decided all of a sudden to not think about the trade-offs and did the lockdowns and did everything in the hopes of stopping COVID and not stepping back like we used to do and make a rational decision of this thing is bad, but to do all of that would be worse because it would cause all these problems over here. So that idea that everything's a trade-off, and Dennis Prager is probably better on this than anybody else at describing that everything is a trade-off. You're going to there's a price to everything you do. Every government action has some level of price. Every decision we make has some price. Smoking this cigar right now, I'm really enjoying. Yes, there's a chance that I would be one of those one of those people that for whatever reason genetically I end up with lung cancer or whatever. But that small chance compared to being able to enjoy a cigar with the men and solve the world's problems here. I make that personal decision.
And that's something that people don't I don't think people instinctually think about trade-offs.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, if I can plug, if you're thinking about a degree, if you're going to go to college, economics is fantastic at teaching.
Don't go to college.
This. College is not for everybody. In fact, for most people, it's not the way to go, in my opinion. But economics is a great degree because for one piece of it, people just don't think about trade-offs. But exactly like you're saying, right?
It makes you think about it.
It makes you think about them. If you choose to spend money here, you're going to have less money down the road for other things and greater things in life, right?
No, there's no limit to money. The federal government
come
just
on.
keep,
That's
they
right.
can spend.
So if we run out, they'll just print more.
Yeah, that was a joke. That was a joke.
So here's a question for you guys. We're talking about like risk analysis, and so
we've gotten a little bit off our island.
Yeah.
No, but this, I'm gonna bring it back to that. So
he's keeping us on track.
How does the government do that in terms of what it's allowed to do? How does the government make risk analysis for the general population, and therefore making decisions based off those risk analysis and then being proper forms?
Can I just give you a real practical example? Yeah. So when I was in the legislature, every time a bill would come out, we would see exactly what you just described, a cost-benefit analysis. There would be an analysis of that bill saying, here's what if we do what the bill says, the author of the bill says that all these benefits will happen. Yeah. Here's what opponents say will be the negative side of that. And if you're opposing the bill, it's because you think the negative outweighs the positive. Right. And if you're supporting it, you're saying the positive outweighs the negative. Mm-hmm. So you literally, I mean, that's what we used to do anyway. I don't know if they still do that. When you were working at the legislature, y'all still did that, right?
Yeah, no, you submitted it as staff. You had your own version. And then I cannot believe I'm blanking on the name of the House Counsel that actually does their own version.
Yeah,
I can't believe I'm blanking on that. That's
Wait,
terrible,
Trey's blanking on something?
What?
Guys, y'all are getting an historic moment in the first rendition of this show.
Oh man, that's terrible. That's terrible.
And you always said cigars made your brain smart.
Yeah, right.
They definitely do that. They definitely do that. But I mean, I got a low start point. So
that's true.
So okay,
and I would say, by the way, if you're handed a 2,000-page bill at midnight and you have to vote on it at 8 o'clock the next morning, like they do in the you don't have the chance to do a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah. So, do you guys think all law is subjective?
Oh man, I don't even know.
Is all law subjective?
I'm not willing to answer that because I have no idea.
That's a good question. I guess it kind of depends on what you're looking at. Well, subjective in terms of like our ability to quote like regulate something or not regulate something. I think there are some things, natural law, for example, that is not subjective, right?
Yeah. So I mean government law.
Yeah. So in terms of when government decides to do something, I don't think there's an argument on whether or not you can infringe upon an individual's liberties under natural law, and then there's things outside of natural law that are completely subjective.
Well,
right?
let's take the example of murder, right? Yeah. Okay. So we would say that it's objective. Yeah. That there's an objective standard that you should not take innocent life. You can't kill someone that is innocent. Yeah. Now, if you, and which is why we would argue that if you were in a situation where there's a shootout in the grocery store and you decide to try to take down the threat, and someone is shot as a result of you engaging that threat. So now shots are fired, bullets are flying, someone innocent dies. You killed them, but it wasn't murder because we define murder. Right. So I would say there are objective levels of this is always wrong. Yeah. But then there are circumstances that change the perfect definition. That was really muddy, I know, but I was trying to think of a better example of.
There definitely are a few things though that fit in that objective side. Murder, rape, things like that. That I don't think there's any argument.
So,
but it's only objective because the society determines it's objective.
But here's my.
I would argue that no society can choose otherwise, though, and that if it does, it's improper. That's what I would argue.
Because I think if it's infringing on other people's liberty, then suddenly that falls under the objective line that you shouldn't be able to do that.
And you do have to be careful with like what you said, because then you could argue that any restriction of like what you consume falls under that.
But that becomes that fancy word externality that we're talking about.
No, I'm saying you have to be careful there. I'm saying there are certain things that fall under natural law, and there are certain things that aren't. Like your ability to your own life cannot be infringed upon in terms of somebody taking it, period. Your ability to consume whatever plant is out there that's a different line, if that makes
Well,
sense.
part of what we're getting into here is moral relativism versus moral absolutes. Is there's
do you believe there's natural law?
Right.
A lot of people
Are
don't.
there things that nature and
don't.
nature's God
Yeah.
says are always wrong?
Yeah.
Right. And I would hope that I've passed that on to you guys. We would all say yes, there are certain things that absolutely are always wrong, and there are things that are choices that are speed limits. Your favorite.
Ooh, we should discuss that
right?
at some point
I mean,
here.
speed-
Get rid of them. Don't need them.
Get rid of them.
That is definitely subjective,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
And
Yeah,
you do your
yeah.
studies and you decide, okay, if we raise the speed limit to 85, then 2,000 more people are going to die, but the freedom to go 85 is worth it. And that's what government does. I mean, if we really were, if Andrew Cuomo was right and saving one life was worth it, then the speed limit in every state would be 5 miles per hour.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
That's
or we wouldn't allow driving at all.
30,000 deaths a year in the U.S.
Yeah.
And
40,000.
It's up to 40,000 now?
Wow.
That's all, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it shifts a little bit, but yeah.
So let's go back to this then. If federal government, in terms of like objective lines, that's where I guess I would draw the line of that. As long as you're infringing on someone else's liberty, and you say that's subjective, but I think that can be decided at an objective level in terms of I don't think. Well, okay, it was like that directly infringing on someone else's liberty, like maybe doing drugs or suicide could affect other people, but not like direct. Immediate, direct. Imminent. And so that's where I think the state level should decide that, or maybe even like a local level, that I think when it gets so big that you can't hold the state level accountable, then I think it should turn into a local level. But I think that there should be an objective line, and I think there can be an objective line for the federal level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so let's stay generally though, because I don't think the question was really answered, is if it is government law in and of itself on any level, can it be both subjective or objective, or is it only subjective and only objective? Because in our society and in most societies, we have said murder is wrong, but is that a subjective view of murder and life because other societies have had murder and not done anything about it?
Well, I think the question,
state-sponsored murder. A lot of states themselves have been the one murdering.
I think that question though is flawed, because I think the question is murder subjective. True, it could be subjective to a serial killer's point of view, but I think that you can make it objective on like a certain level, because I think it does. I think it differs the different levels.
Well, I think where you make it objective is the fundamental principles that decision is made off of. So in terms of we make that decision based off a Judeo-Christian worldview.
Well, not necessarily,
and that's why it's objective to us. But people,
us, sure.
Say some tribalistic community that maybe doesn't even have laws. Mm-hmm. They have a subjective view on murder, on the value of life. So if they were to make laws that said murder's all right, murder's okay, we're going to allow that. That law is subjective. But are y'all saying that's a subjective law based on an objective view of life?
Well, it all comes back to whether or not you believe that there are natural laws at all.
Right. So then I'm saying all law stemming from law in and of itself can't be. And it can't say something is objectively right or wrong because it's made by someone who's got a subjective view. All right, so we were just talking about whether law is subjective or objective, just like law in general, government law. But you made the point that we're kind of getting off track again.
I objectively subject to that.
Anyway.
It is a little. It's a little complex. Even
it is.
Right? And so, he said objectively subject to that when it's subjectively.
I meant to say I subjectively object to that.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Anyway, let's go. Let's get back though to kind of the basis of this conversation.
Yeah.
What is the proper role of government? Wasn't that how we started?
Well,
yes, that's how we started.
How about we move from our island to today? To make it a little more practical for everybody listening, right? So I'm a little bit curious when it comes to the issue of like narcotics. Mm-hmm. What's y'all's view on that? In today's society with our constitutional system of government, our republic form of government.
My opinion on narcotics is that Pablo Escobar was a brilliant thug.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair.
A brilliant thug. No,
at least in the show he was.
In the show anyway, yeah.
Man.
I guess multiple ways of looking at it, right? Should the federal government have any role in it? Because right now they do.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know if they should.
I think so. Let's look at it from a policy perspective. If you do decide that some things are so dangerous you don't want them in your culture. And so, marijuana is one that is harder to make the argument than crack cocaine. People do die sometimes the first time they try crack cocaine.
And we should clarify, we are also talking in this context all recreational. Right, we're not talking about medical use.
Yes. Right. Purely talking, is it legal for an individual to just sell or use crack cocaine? And the argument, of course, is not only can you die the first time you use it, but almost anybody that ever uses it once is addicted and literally destroys their life because it completely consumes them. They end up, doing whatever it takes to get more. So it is something that most people agree, that's so bad, I don't want it in my neighborhood. I don't want my child to have access to it. I don't want me to have access to it. I don't want my family to have access to it. And I don't want my neighbor to have it. It's just so bad, we don't want it on our island.
Yeah.
So now, is it the states that should decide that, or is it the federal government? Constitutionally, the federal government does not have the power to do all the drug laws that it does right now. However, I do get the policy argument that if Oklahoma legalizes it and Texas doesn't, it's really easy to drive across the state line, get it, and drive it back. Right? That is something that is hard to enforce at the state level. You can do it. I mean, you could have border checks, you could do all kinds of things, but it does, from a policy perspective, I understand why it is much easier at a national level to say something like that's not going to be.
You understand it, but still disagree, right?
Yeah. I would just argue for a constitutional amendment to do it. I would say that's something just like the 18th Amendment that outlawed alcohol. Before that, nobody thought the federal government had the power to say you can't have alcohol.
Right.
So they would have also thought you can't have crack cocaine.
Right.
But the nation said it's so bad, alcoholism was so bad, that we're going to outlaw it.
But do you agree with that?
Then it didn't
move,
work,
though?
and you ended up with a black market and Al Capone and everything else that made it worse. And so we did the 21st Amendment and reversed it. But I would say if you're going to outlaw it, it should be a constitutional amendment if you're going to do it at the federal level.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm kind of torn on this. I really don't have a confident answer, but I guess the only way to answer it is for someone who is in power, who has the authority to make those decisions, to be the one to determine what is too bad and what's not too bad.
I would want to stop you there and say not someone, because I never think one person should make decisions like that.
Right, the people.
Some legislative body
could
debate it, look at the studies, Rhett could come in and make his argument for Jimmy, and then we could show that how bad it is when a bunch of Jimmies are on it, so.
Right. Well, so when we say should the government be able to, or do we think, all drugs should be legal, or should there be any, what kind of restrictions should we go with in terms of narcotics? Are we answering this on a personal level, or are we answering this, do we think the government right now should
I thought your question was, should the federal government be able to, or should it be left to the states?
Yeah, that was the
and then I took it to, should it be outlawed at all?
Yeah,
and if so, then
let's go down that route. And I'm not 100% decided on it, but there are a couple of conversation points that I think should be made when we're trying to figure out whether or not it's the cost of it far outweigh the benefits. Right? Is it worth infringing on liberties, or the cost so high? So there's no doubt when it comes to the harder drugs, the devastation that they create, right? There's an interesting argument that I don't think everybody here would agree with, but that many economists like my hero Thomas Sowell make, which is that because they're illegal, they cause so much crime, for example, that the cost of people getting hooked on these things and then the price being so high because of it being an illegal good that they have to then go out and commit a crime to get the money to get it, that the cost of that in general outweighs the cost if it was legal. And this is the interesting point that they make, and that if pharmaceutical companies could make it for what they really cost, which is like nothing, that the cost of people being addicted to that would be less than the cost of crime. So there are interesting arguments like that that can kind of get into the weeds on it that is more than we want to do here, but it makes it where it's not as black and white as I think I thought when I was a little bit younger.
That comes back to your trade-off, though, earlier.
Exactly, right. Yeah. So in terms of like on a state level, what is the trade-off there, right? There's some interesting points
because you have to also say the trade-off is that if you don't want to pay the price on enforcement and crime that comes from something being illegal, you are going to pay a higher price of more people using it because it is legal.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt that when something is legal, as my friend Frank Turk says, the law is a good teacher. Yeah. And when you make something legal, it teaches people that this is okay.
100%.
And more people will do it. And that's not to say you outlaw anything that's bad. I mean, this is back to that, where's the line, right?
Right. I mean, it did work really well with alcohol.
I would say if I was the legislator trying to decide, part of my decision matrix, and this is just personal, But part of my decision matrix is whether or not it is an imminent killer or imminent danger type thing. So like alcohol does take time to become addicted to it, to destroy your body health, all that kind of stuff. And alcohol can be healthy. It can be used in a healthy way. And so so if I were making the decision, if I was on that committee, I would be voting, against making alcohol illegal. I would say that's too slow of a burn, and that's something that should be allowed. And I would struggle on marijuana. I always have struggled on the question of marijuana because it's also a slow burn. It's not something that goes through immediately, and there are medicinal uses for it. And that, so that's a much harder one. And it's easy for me to vote for making something illegal that has a very quick damage to the public. And even when we say it's illegal, that doesn't mean it cannot be obtained. Like there are tons of legal narcotics that you get through a pharmacy and through a doctor.
That's exactly the point I was going to make in a second. Yeah.
Yeah. So
okay, real quickly. So let me just ask you about federal government wise. Do you think the federal government should have the power to say no to cocaine?
If I were debating a constitutional amendment,
but so saying federal government, all states, in no instance can you use cocaine. Because instantly, I guess I disagree. Because, I'm an instant no, and then the states decide, and this is where the island comes back to place, is that Jimmy can do whatever he wants. But if the sides of the island, decide to not let Jimmy do that thing, then that's where it can be okay, I guess, for the government.
And I would hope that it would be bad enough that you could win that in each of the 50 states at the state level and the state legislatures.
But then again, that's where it comes to maybe holding the states accountable is too difficult right now, just because of how big the states are, and that if they can tell you what you can consume, that means that they can also tell you that the big gulp or whatever, too big of sodas is too dangerous. Therefore, you can't have that even in the state. Not a federal thing, but in the state, you can't have that. So my question for you guys is, what do you guys think for America, because the states are so big, should it be at even a more local level for its like counties?
I think it's hard at that point because of how small they are, where sometimes you live in multiple counties in your lifetime or in the same year, or you're doing business in multiple counties. So
wasn't it kind of like that for states in the original?
Well, but you still had the same size land mass in terms of.
It wasn't Texas and California though. It was those
a little bit smaller states. You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think enforcement at that point might become too difficult. I love the states being laboratories of freedom, right? Because they're the right size to be able to test things out. If Nevada wants to have prostitution, heroin, cocaine, everything legal, and the other 49 states have everything illegal, then it can be done, right, as it now is with prostitution.
I'm interested.
And even if we disagree with it, that's still, I don't know, that seems like the right balance between allowing states to choose.
I'm very intrigued to see like how big Hays County is in comparison to like some of the original states. I know it would be smaller, but it would be kind of...
It's already as big as some states
exactly.
right now. There are states with only 300,000 people, so
I don't know.
Hays County's got 250
now. So. Well, and definitely in the Founders' Day, it would have been bigger than a lot of the states. Right. Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question.
Well, one part of what Rhett's getting at for you in the audience is that there was a debate among the founders of how big a republic could be and still be free, because it gets to the point where you can't hold those elected officials accountable. They would have probably argued, and in fact, some of them said 50 million was probably the most you could have and make it work. Well, we're at 350 million, right? And it's part of the reason it's so hard to hold our Congress accountable or the president, and that's one of the reasons that we constantly advocate for bringing the power back to the local level so that you can hold the local official accountable. And I would argue Texas is too big. We're at 30 million. Yeah. It's too big to leave too much power in Austin at the legislature. And it does need to come back, like you're saying, some of these things. Now, I would disagree with you on the drug thing being county, because, again, it's just enforcement's impossible. If Hays County said, all drugs were legal, and then Travis County said, that would be backwards. If Travis County said all drugs are legal and surrounding counties all said it's not, well, it's too easy to just drive.
So that's the question.
And that actually, real quick, it is important to make clear that the states created the federal government and the states created the counties. Right, so states were kind of built and designed, and even in the Founders' View, the reason for the Electoral College was that states should be represented kind of as their own entity, right? So I think we often mislabel local is best. I don't think it always is. So like smaller form of government isn't always best. There's like this perfect midpoint where the states,
like where do you stop?
Exactly. Then you could go down to where, okay, does every HOA, right, for a neighborhood have totally different laws, right? And so I think there is a balance there. It's hard to find.
Okay, well, here's my question is restoring it back to the way the founders intended it to be. If we basically did create a more local level, for it to be the smallest local form of government, and then the next state would be what we have now as local, since the size is what it was back then.
Right, compared to then, yeah.
Compared to then. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, definitely, yeah.
I don't know, because I'm obviously not set on this, it's just a question. So
well, just for perspective, the whole nation was 3 million.
Yeah.
The whole nation.
That's insane.
Right. We have more than that in Houston. More than that in Dallas.
Right.
Hey, Dad, can you hand me that cigar case right there?
Yeah. No, but that's the whole question. Oh yeah, that's the whole question of like, does it come down to are we at the point where it does need to create decentralized and just like I don't know, restore it back to. It's just so tough. Maybe that's where Texas comes into play, and maybe we just need to.
I knew we'd end up as a
nation
before it was over.
I don't know.
We're kind of getting away from the overall fundamental question of these things. We're getting into specific situations that we're in now, and that's fine.
Let's talk about it.
So there's not really a solid answer on narcotics, I guess. It is such a dependent thing, I guess, on
it is one of those that the society has to decide.
It's a legitimate policy question. It's a legitimate policy question. Yeah, I mean I think there's arguments to be made on both sides of it, and it is a legitimate. It's one society has the right to answer, if that makes sense, right? So like when you enter into society, you're choosing to give up natural liberty in return for rights within a government, right? And this is one area where it's not infringing upon your natural law rights. So I don't have the same instant hesitation with it as I do with other things. But I still do find the argument of complete legalization compelling. I think there's some evidence for it that make me a little more towards that line than I was when I was younger.
So if we do like what we did with the 18th Amendment, would you reconsider if down the line it became too destructive and it just became too much of a harm to society?
Yeah, I think that's the right way to view policy, right? We make a course correction, and then if we find out that we're wrong, we course correct again.
So this comes back to kind of a fundamental view of how we are to do law. It's kind of a cause and effect, a testing of. It's like with science, it's cause and effect. It's experimenting, finding out what works. So with all these different realistic things, substances and stuff that we're doing and taking part in, it's kind of, you just got to see what works and test the waters and then change. And I guess that is kind of more of a fundamental view of what law is. Law should be changing. Not on what we would say, not on what we would say are fundamental human rights, but I guess in like what do you call these wouldn't be external thing. Well, I guess so, like things like narcotics would be like an external thing outside of objective truth and reality. But when it comes to things that are subjective, laws need to change based on how it affects society, and you need to see if it works, if it doesn't. Does that make sense?
Well, there's some things, that you would argue are inherent rights, fundamental rights, that shouldn't be violated. And then there are things like speed limits that are debatable.
All right, guys, that's the question. Let's talk about it. Do y'all think that speed limits should be abolished?
We do have to bring an end to this episode at some point. I mean, we're supposed to do a lot more of these.
The answer, no.
See, here's the thing.
Should not be abolished.
I originally thought about this when I was 15, and I wasn't driving at that point, and I was like, when I started driving, I'll probably swap. I started driving. I'm more in favor of getting rid of speed limits. Are you kidding me?
Well, and let's in all seriousness, let's look at the policy side of it. Some states do have where it's recommended, right? And then it's actually, in terms of like law enforcement's ability to pull you over, it's if you're being unsafe or reckless, right? Is Idaho one of those?
Texas is actually one of those that doesn't have the law basically saying. Most states have it to where as soon as you're exceeding the speed limit, you're like in breach of law, and therefore you can be pulled over and given a ticket.
You have to justify it in Texas, right?
In Texas, like exactly. In Texas, there it's worded differently. So basically,
this is not an encouragement to speed. We should make very, very clear.
But it's just an encouragement not to be reckless. You can speed, but if you're not being reckless,
no.
Okay, wait. Okay, so I want to bring this. This actually gives us a chance to go back to Reagan's esoteric argument of subjective or objective. Because I prefer the speed limit that is objective, so that whether or not I'm being reckless is not left only to
the officer,
that particular officer's
Whoa. If the speed limit is 60 and you're going 40, you're disrupting the traffic. The police officer can see that and subjectively pull you over and give you a ticket. And that's why it's not only up to the officer, because without speed limits, they pull you over, give you a ticket. You can always appeal to a court. And so then it would be under other people, not just the officer. And that's the beauty of the process.
Yeah, if you have time to go to court and have a jury trial.
But if a guy, not jury, it's just a judge.
Ticket.
But if a guy pulls
you can ask for a jury trial.
Well, you could, but you could also ask for a judge.
Not that I have experience with that when I was your age.
Wait, who at this table have not received a speed?
Oh,
speeding
interesting.
Ticket?
That's
the two
really
that are in favor
of we just want everybody else to experience our pain.
Yeah, right.
No. Look, but my point was, if you were going over that limit, right?
Okay.
So that, like, on a highway in West Texas, nobody's around, and I feel like I can go 120 and be perfectly safe, right? And yet that if the law says 85 is the most I can go, then if I go 120, it's an objective standard.
And somehow you can still get pulled over going 40 in a 60.
Well, but there is you also don't want people going 40 in a 60.
Well, right, but there's no objective line having a minimum speed limit. We don't have it now, and
we do.
There's no objective line of a minimum speed limit.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, some places do that. They have a minimum.
No, I'm talking statewide. I'm talking, and it works. And it works not having a minimum speed limit. The idea is that the speed limit would and also the people that would want to abolish speed limits, it would still have the suggested speed limit sign. So there would still be like a suggested amount, so that people new to the area wouldn't just go crazy with it, but it would still be more so the flow of traffic, which is how a lot of the times it comes down to. It's more so the flow of traffic. And if a bunch of people are going 20 over, I mean, you're kind of gonna go 20 over.
Most of the time people are going 20.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I wonder, can we separate out even like rural versus urban?
That was always my argument, was that if it's inside the city, if you're in neighborhoods or whatever, that neighborhood.
I think that neighborhood.
Well, because I'm even thinking about
we don't want people going 100 miles an hour down.
Like here in Texas, right? If you're going west on 10, if you're going like east, like when I would drive to A&M, there are long stretches of roads, straight highway, where you don't see another car for half an hour, right?
And so you were going 120 with a movie on your iPad on the steering wheel.
I can neither confirm nor deny. But in those cases, this policy could actually work pretty well in terms of allowing, in those situations where there's nobody around, you're in rural, you have a suggested speed limit, you can go fast, you're not at a risk of harming anybody else. When you're inside the city, the argument is a little bit different, right? If you have one dude going 100 in the middle of downtown Austin, that's not going to work out well for anybody. Pedestrian walks out, etc.
Well,
so
that's
where the beauty of policy does allow you to weigh and
guys, there's a clear answer here. We just need to ban cities.
Ban
cities whatsoever.
I'll vote for that.
But here's where I'll disagree with you on that. I think that even in cities it shouldn't be there, but that it is still subjected to the cops, so it's reckless driving. If you're disrupting the flow of traffic, whether that's 20 miles per hour below what everyone else is going or 20 miles per hour above what everyone else is going, but it at least leaves the option essentially to basically go toe that line. And if you're going too fast, you'll learn from it and get pulled over by a cop. And if you think you were within the flow of traffic, you could always appeal to a court, the same way you can now. But I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
I think this is John Galt down here.
Oh my goodness.
Who's that?
Atlas Shrugged is your next book to read.
Yeah.
Though we're not Ayn Rand fans, really. I like Atlas Shrugged, but she was very, very secular.
Yeah.
No, I mean, her books are good books. The Fountainhead is a great book on individualism. Atlas Shrugged is obviously a great book, but her philosophy, definitely has some
speaking of books, what are some other book recommendations y'all have on the proper role of government? There is the book, The Proper Role of Government.
Let's see. Do you have
that we could do?
how
Who's
much
that by
time?
again?
Ezra Benson. It's a quick read. It's really
Ezra
a pamphlet.
Benson.
More
So,
than
guys, look up The Proper Role of Government. Read that book.
Bastiat's the Law.
Bastiat's the Law, absolutely.
Is short, 60 pages.
I need to read that, man. That's my next one. And
yeah.
That's true.
The Road to Serfdom.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything by Hayek is good. He's got a lot, but even simple books like, guys, Animal Farm. You absolutely got to read Animal Farm.
Actually, that would be if you haven't done much reading in this arena, I would start with those kind of books, right? Like read Animal Farm, 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World. Those kind of they're novels, and so they're entertaining in reading. But they really make you think about, man, do I want government to be able to do this and do that, and and so then you read those and it'll get you really thinking about it, and then you can come back and read The Law and Road to Serfdom and these kind of books.
And obviously Monster Hunter International.
It's very important.
Stormlight Archives.
Come on
now. I mean,
Great.
Okay, real quick plug for y'all before we finish out here. The shirts that my dad and I are wearing, and the hats as well.
Yes.
These are Defender Gear merchandise, and if you guys want to pick up one of these hats and also one of these shirts, I don't know if you can read it. You might have just seen the socialism on top because of my laptop, but in case you couldn't read it, it says socialism kills because it does. So you can go get this shirt, that shirt, all that at defender-gear.com. Use code Reagan10 for 10% off, or code Patriot1776.
No, if you're watching this, use Reagan10.
Use Reagan10 for 10% off. Seriously, they got a lot of cool stuff. These aren't currently available, but I think they'll be available.
They'll be available in about 2 weeks.
In about 2 weeks, yeah.
They were available. They just sold out.
They sold out the first day we had them available.
Yeah.
So if you want to get one in the next couple of weeks, come to Front Sight with us. In our May trip, and I guess in one of our April trips as well, and we'll have those. So, I got one of my audio mixed up here. Anyway, that was a fun conversation, guys.
That was a good one.
That was a very good one.
We're gonna be trying to do one of these.
Rhett and I do not do hard drugs.
That needs to be stated clearly.
They are wrong about legalizing drugs. Let me throw that back out there.
Well, in our next one, we should talk about cigars. And why we actually smoke cigars and we think it's okay. And we're going to try to do one of these at least once a month, if not more frequently than that. But these are a little bit longer. We can get a lot more in depth, and it's just, off the cuff.
Wait, I thought we were just halfway through. We're not.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we can keep people's attention span for that long. We're not Joe Rogan quite yet, all right? But anyway, that was really fun. Thank y'all for joining me for this square table discussion on the proper role of government.
This is not a square.
This rectangle table discussion. Yeah, that's what I'm going to title it. A rectangle table discussion. Rectangle table discussion? Yeah, something like that. All right, guys.
A Reagan rectangle.
Yeah, right. Okay. Make sure to share the podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, share it on there. You can also support the podcast on there. And go comment on YouTube, and I'll make sure to read the comments in the next one and have a little dialogue and answer some questions or whatever you got. Defender-gear.com, code Reagan10 for 10% off on any gear that you want. Go check out biblicalcitizens.com, patriotacademy.com, and also come join us out at Front Sight. We've got tons of trips throughout the year, plenty of availability for that. So, I think that's about it for me, guys. Y'all got any closing thoughts?
I'm glad that y'all could finally concede to Trey and I's
okay. Okay, thank y'all for watching and listening before Rhett gets too big of a head. But anyway, all right. Thank y'all for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.